Hello and welcome. Welcome to Quilt Conversations Live. I'm Geraldine Wilkins, the Living Water Quilter. I'm so glad to be with you again. I am back from vacation, so this is not a recording. This is live. I'm not in the chat today. Hello, Lori. Welcome. Hello, Kimberly. Hello, Lavetta. And I think Rochelle is also in the house. As you know, we have been going through the Quilting Master Class series, and this is December 1st. This episode of Quilt Conversations Live is sponsored in part by Clover. Clover makes wonderful products that we use for sewing, quilting, and crafting, products that we love. And the featured product for today is, I think, a perfect stocking stuffer if you're looking for last minute gifts for your crafty quilting friends. This might be the answer. I'm going to show it to you. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the Clover featured product for today. Going to my overhead camera, and here it is. It is a thread cutter pendant. Have you seen this before? Are you familiar with this? It has these individual notches. Hopefully you can see that. See the notches? That's because you can cut thread with it. If I take some thread, say I'm sewing, doing some hand sewing or burying threads, and I need to cut the thread, in between those notches is a blade, and I can run thread right through that, and it cuts the thread. It can be held with a pendant, as a pendant, by putting some um, either a chain, or I have put some crafting a rope through it, or you can put it inside a spool just like this, and it will stay in place. See, it doesn't fall out, it stays right in place. And then you can easily cut your thread as you are removing thread from the spool and you want to cut the thread. All you have to do is, let's see, go around and then go through one of the notches, and then you can cut the thread. I think this is a great gift for one of our crafting friends, right? Great retreat gift, something to use whether you're hand sewing binding or you want to use it for hand quilting. It is the Clover thread cutter and pendant. All right. So thank you, ladies, for being here. Who else has popped in? I see Cassie is here. Hello, Cassie. Who else dropped in? There's Teresa Green. Hello, hello. So glad that you're here. Welcome, welcome. So, we have been going through basically what? The 10 steps to stress free machine quilting, right? In this masterclass series. Hello, Sherry. Welcome. Is it snowing in Colorado? Is it snowing? I think you say hi. Snowing in Colorado. We haven't had snow yet here in Virginia. Hopefully, it won't be too bad for you in terms of the amount of snow. I hope you can have fun with the grandkids in the snow. That would be nice. So, who remembers the 10 steps and which is your favorite step? We don't enjoy every step of the quilting process, but we must do these steps, right, to complete a quilt. What step is your favorite? Let us know in the chat. Which is your least favorite? Or let us know which step you are working on. Are you working on your fabric preparation? Step 1, you've purchased the fabric, you found quality fabric, you've pre-washed it, and now you're ready to cut the fabric. It's all prepped and ready to cut, and now you're going to piece what you've cut. Are you still working on your piecing skills? How's your 1/4 inch? What about your pressing method? Number 3, your pressing method. Are you following the pattern instructions? Do you press your seams to one side? Do you have a preference? Do you follow the pattern or do you do your own thing? What about batting? How are you on choosing the right batting for your project? Do you know about batting loft or thickness? Do you prefer synthetic batting or cotton batting or a blend of the two? Then, once you have your top made, your batting selected, what basting method have you tried? And which ones are a go-to basting method and ones that you just will never do, right? Maybe you like fusible batting, and that will help you with your basting because you will fuse it to the top and or backing fabric. Let's see what we have in the chat. Nothing just yet. So, what are you working on? What's your favorite part of the quilting process? Let us know in the chat. Next, quilt stabilization. Maybe you're still working on that area. I know sometimes I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to stabilize the quilt for the design I've selected to quilt the fabric. That's going to influence how we stabilize the quilt. What quilting pattern and what quilting technique are we going to use to quilt the 3 layers, the top, the batting, and the backing together? Now, what about the quilting design and how we're going to place it in the quilt? You notice how these are interwoven, the batting selection, right? The quilting pattern and placement, and then how we stabilize. Those 3 will influence each other, right? Stitch in a ditch. Yes, Loretta, that is a wonderful way, and it works fantastic for stitching in the ditch. And we don't have to stitch in the ditch in the entire quilt. We can stitch in strategic places to stabilize the quilt and then start quilting with our favorite method of machine quilting or hand quilting. And then we can stitch whatever pattern we choose based on how far apart the stitches can go, right? That's based on our batting selection. So tonight we are on thread color and weight, and we're going to talk about practicing methods. But before I do that, if you're new here and you're wondering, what are these 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting? What is she talking about? Is this part of the masterclass series? And the answer is yes. If you missed part 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, go back and watch the replay. But I am going to recap the steps we've covered so far with an example. That way you can see, and those who were here last time can get reacquainted with a visual representation of the steps we've covered so far. All right, so Sherry says she is working on piecing and thinking about quilting pattern. That is what is part of her, where she is in her journey with quilting, right? Lori says she gets stuck on the quilting design. That's a good place to be. That just means that you're going to have more fun. I think Sherry's in the same place. And so tonight's conversation about practice methods is connected to selecting a quilting pattern. Because the truth is, we have to practice and we have to not be afraid to pick a pattern, right, to quilt our projects with. So for the recap fabric, I'm going to use my Lydia tote bag as an example. I pressed the fabric. Of course, I washed it, right? And then I did my favorite thing. I love starch. I use starch to help stabilize the fabric so that when I cut the fabric, I will have nice, clean cuts and very little stretch in the fabric. Not only that, while I like to have nicely prepared fabric, what are my cutting methods? Am I using templates? And if I am, how do I secure the template on top of the fabric so it doesn't shift while cutting? What kind of cutter am I using? A rotary cutter? What kind of mat? All these tools help us with our accuracy, but fabric placement, rather fabric preparation, is also key, right? The right tools, right preparation. So now all of my pieces for my tote bag are cut and laid out. They are ready to be sewn together. I've prepped the fabric. It's been cut with a template, the exact size based on the template, and now I'm ready to piece it together. So using several piecing techniques like chain piecing, pinning the fabric. What are your favorite ways to piece? Do you like a 1/4 inch foot? Or do you position the needle a 1/4 inch away from the edge of the foot? There are multiple ways we can get accurate piecing. And remember, you always want to test your 1/4 inch before you begin. Sometimes I've done this in the past. I thought the machine was stitching at a 1/4 inch, but it was positioned for a previous project. And I looked at the seam allowance and I thought, this doesn't look right. Then I checked and it was way off, ladies. I'm glad I checked it before I went too far. So once we do that, what's next? We need to press. Remember, all of these steps are going to influence machine quilting, no matter what technique we use, whether it's walking foot quilting, ruler quilting, or free motion quilting. Lori says that she loves the 1/4 inch foot and that she's addicted to accuracy the foot with the guide gives. Fantastic. That's what is important. You try different techniques, find the one that works for you and gives you the best and consistent results. So there are a number of ways that we can press our seams, right? To one side. And in this Lydia Tote course, I give instructions on how to press. Whether it's a pattern or a course, they're going to tell you how to press to get certain results, especially if it's a pattern that has points or stars in it. They're going to give you very specific instructions. Follow those instructions, right? You can use a dry press, a hot press, a wet press, meaning steam. What is the best way to press? Are you using a wool mat? That's one of the things that has come out in recent years, that pressing with a wool mat gives you better results, right? It doesn't stretch the fabric as you're pressing. Do you want to use steam? Excuse me. Or do you want a dry, hot press or no heat at all? You just want to use a roller. I like to use a roller as I'm piecing. Oh, Sherry, thank you. It is fun, isn't it? It's fun fabric. Yes, it does. It doesn't mean that I will not use a iron. The roll press allows me to speed piece. I can continue to sew and finish a block at my machine with a roller. Keep sewing and then I take it to an iron and then I will press with heat on a wool mat. So what is next? Excuse me. For the Lydia tote bag, the batting of choice is actually foam. For my tote bags, I like to use foam. Now it's not that I've never used cotton batting or polyester batting, but I find that soft and stable or something similar foam works really nice for tote bags, right? So that's my choice. Next, I like to spray baste. With June Taylor specifically, a little goes a long way. Never overuse basting spray, right? Just a little goes a long way. Then I have already decided I'm going to ruler quilt. That's my chosen method to quilt the project, to quilt the tote bag with a straight edge ruler. Will I have to baste this? It's a small tote. Basting wasn't, not basting, but stabilizing. Will I have to stabilize? In this instance, stabilizing wasn't really necessary. Plus, because of the design that I chose, perhaps it may not work in some areas of the tote to stitch in the ditch. But in other areas, it may work. So I could stitch in the ditch along that beautiful piping or narrow stitching if I wanted to stabilize it. So this is the final result. So far, I've made 3 of these tote bags, 3 of them. And in the course, I give you step-by-step instructions. Most of the photos you just saw are in the actual pattern that you get with the course. It's a pattern that's step-by-step for making the tote with diagrams and photos, and then step-by-step ruler quilting videos on how to quilt this tote. Okay, so we have gone through, using an example, a tote bag. And a tote bag is actually a practice method. So we're talking about thread tonight, but we're also talking about practice methods. So using a small project like a tote is a way to practice your fabric preparation, right? To test out different starches. Maybe you're just learning about stabilizing fabric. Small projects like that, you can test. Maybe you're still testing out different battings and you're not sure what batting you want to use. You can test it in a small project. This is practice methods for testing the 10 steps, for testing your fabric prep, for testing how you baste a quilt or a project, for how you press. All of your projects can be your practice for all 10 steps. Think about that. Don't lose the opportunity to test something new, whether it's a tool, a technique, on projects that you are working on. It doesn't have to be a complete test. It could be one thing that you want to test, or it could be multiple. Hopefully that makes sense. So now let's talk about thread. How many of you have a favorite thread? Let us know in the chat what thread type and what thread weight you use for piecing. What thread type and what thread weight? Does it matter what thread weight you use or type? It is important for our quilting to know about thread. If that is not on your list, to get better acquainted with thread types, thread weights, put it on your list. We each should have, my recommendation, have threads that we use for piecing, threads that we use for quilting, threads that we use for stabilization, at least on a minimum 3 threads that we use for those tasks, for piecing, for quilt stabilization, and then the third for quilting. So Jennifer says it depends on the project. So your piecing thread changes depending on the project. If you're quilting, making a quilt, making a tote where you piece the fabrics together, your thread will change. So we're talking about a quilt. What quilting thread do you use? Weight and what type? Cotton, polyester. It has to be all cotton for Jennifer. Okay. Anyone else? Lori, Cassie, what threads do you use for piecing? Typically polyester. Okay. I see what you mean. If it has to be all cotton. So Lori says I've used Aurifil 50 weight. Okay, 50 weight thread. 50 weight thread is a popular weight for piecing. Some use 60 weight thread. Some use a combination of polyester and cotton thread, and then they will use that in a 50 weight or a 60 weight for piecing. It's rare that I hear ladies using 40 weight or thicker thread for piecing. It's either 50 or 60, right? Kimberly uses cotton and 50. Cassie uses cotton only. Fantastic. I love that we have options. We have options. But why do you use cotton only or polyester only? Is there a reason? What about thread quality? Let us know in the chat things that let you know you have good quality thread. Write one thing in the chat to let us know what is good quality thread. Let's go to the overhead camera, look at some threads that I have here. This is a cotton thread. It is 50 weight. It's a thicker thread than 60. It's kind of middle of the road. Okay, this is a 60 weight thread. It's very thin compared to the 50. Hello, Bonita. Jennifer says less breakage. Yes, that's a good answer. Aurifil 50 weight for piecing. I've been trying Glide 40, but I have shredding going on. That might be a bad spool. I have used Glide 40 weight for a lot of my projects, and anytime that I've had any shredding, it's just been a bad spool of thread. Yeah. So try another spool. Hopefully that won't happen. Okay, so here's one that's called So Fine. Let's see if I can get this so the camera, yeah. So Fine is a 50 weight. Do you see it says pound 50? That's 50 weight. You see the slash and then the number 3. What does that 3 stand for? What does the 3 stand for? Who knows what that stands for? And it's a polyester thread. This is a thread that many like to use for piecing. It's a 50 weight thread, and it is a polyester thread. It's strong. It's very strong. Strong thread for piecing. So Rochelle says she's not too picky. If I try to break it and it holds up, then I use it. I'm not too picky. All right. 3 strands. Yes, 3-ply. 3-ply thread is strong. So when you're looking for thread, you want to look for quality thread that has what? 3 plies, minimum 2. 3 is better. 3-ply. But there's another thing we want to consider with thread is how long the thread is when they put it together, and that's called the staple. The staple is the length of the strands that they put together. They have 3 strands that they put together, and then they have to put another strand. If the strand is short instead of a long strand, it has a higher potential to have more lint. So if you pick up a spool of thread and it looks fuzzy, it's likely that it is a short staple, meaning a short strand thread. and you will get a lot of lint in your machine. Short staple. So let's see. There's one here that says long staple. Let's see. I think it's this one. Get my glasses. Not that one. Nope, it's not that one. Let's see. I thought I brought one with me. I guess I put it back down on the shelf and I didn't realize it. Let's see, polyester. Let's see. Okay. Nope, not that one. Well, that is something you want to consider. Put it that way. Short staple or long staple. 2-ply or 3-ply. Thread weights. This is a thread by Wonderfil called Invisifil, and it is a 100-weight thread. In what instance would you use 100 weight? That means it is what? Compared to a 50-weight thread, is it thinner or thicker? Hey, good evening, Jacqueline. So glad that you're here. Yes, Jennifer, 3-ply was the number 3 indicator on the thread. When we saw that on the So Fine thread, Jacqueline says thin. Yes, 100 weight is thinner than 60. When will you use 100 weight thread? What's a good example of the 3 things that I mentioned that in the 10 steps where we're going to use thread that we might want to use 100 weight thread? Or there's another Wonderfil thread that's 80 weight. So 80 and then 100. Imagine how thin that is. Even if I took it out, I don't even know if you could see it. Embroidery, yes, embroidery. But in quilting, when would we use a, let me try another one. That one's not open. I think the other end is. When would we use a 100 or 80 weight thread? Try this side. Yeah. I don't even think you'll be able to see it, but I'll put it on this gray thread. Maybe you'll be able to see. Here it is. I can barely see it to pick it up. It's so thin. Can you see that? That's the 100, and this is 60 weight. What you see here is 60 weight. Hold that. Okay. So the difference between the two, put it on my nail. Maybe that'll help. Yeah, very, very thin. Thinner thread. All right. Stabilizing. Yes, Rochelle. Yes, stabilizing. When we use 60 or 80 or 100 in the ditch, it's going to blend right into that seam. It's going to blend and it will disappear in the back. I will use those threads in the bobbin also when I'm quilting. Yes, special quilt designs that are dense. Absolutely. That's another example. Fantastic. Yes, Zena. Exactly. Decorative stitches. On our machines where we have decorative stitching that is dense, we want to use lighter thread. Ladies, you are amazing. You got it. Amazing. That is exactly it. Now, 100 weight is the thinnest thread. Yes. 100 thin, 80, a little bit thicker, then 60, then 50, and then 40 is what I like to use for quilting on the top where you can see the thread. Once you go past 40, most use 30 weight for like hand quilting or hand embroidery. But that's why we want to learn. That's why we want to learn about thread weight. We may not use the whole list of 100, 80, 60, 50, 40. Find the threads that you like for the specific tasks, quilting tasks that you're going to use, right? If you like to use, or let's see, what is it? Applique. If you like applique and you want to hand stitch the applique, you might want to use a lightweight thread, right? Because you don't want the stitching of the applique to be seen. Maybe you do want it to be seen and you're using a special stitch around the applique. Then you might use a heavier weight thread. It's your personal choice. That's why when we learn about thread, we can create beautiful quilts specific to our style and preference. You can decide in one quilt to use 4 different threads, right? One for piecing, 50 weight. It's an applique quilt. Then you're going to use maybe a 60 weight to stitch around the applique. When the quilt top is finished, you want to stabilize the quilt. You've decided that you want to use 80 weight thread to stitch in the ditch, or maybe the same 60 that you used for the applique. Now that it's stabilized and you've chosen your pattern and you want the quilting to shine in the quilt along with the applique, you want them to have 50-50 billing, right? You want them both to be center stage. You're going to use maybe a 40 weight thread with your quilting pattern. But maybe, no, I don't want the applique to be taken over by the quilting. I want the quilting to blend with the piecing in the back. I want the applique to shine. Then you're going to use a lighter thread that does not show as much on the quilt. So you might end up using what? 50 weight, 60 weight, right? And you may have very loose quilting, not highly dense quilting. And as a result, you have chosen a batting that allows you to quilt further apart. That's one way that we start to make our decisions on what kind of pattern we're going to use, what we want the quilt to say, how it's going to be used. I was told to always use cotton thread because it shrinks with the quilt in the wash. Well, all I say to anything that you hear, even from me, is to test. Test, make a simple 4-patch quilt, 9-patch. Put a binding on it. Test it with cotton thread, polyester thread. Wash it, press it, do everything to it, and see what happens, right? Threads of yesterday are not the threads of today. So if you find that you like Aurifil thread, maybe you like Metler thread, Wonderfil thread, all of these companies have extensive information about their thread. Shrinking properties, whether it's polyester or cotton or a combination. What kind of polyester thread is it? Maybe the polyester is made to look like cotton and it has this matte finish. Learn about the threads and what they can do and won't do. Not every thread is the same. Just because it says polyester on it doesn't mean that it has a certain amount of stretch or shrinkage. Learn about that by going to the thread website and getting the information so that it suits your specific goals. And if you're the type that wants to keep it simple, narrow down your choices. One piecing thread, one stabilizing thread, one quilting thread type. Then each of these have a type, whether it's cotton or polyester combination. Then you narrow down your weights. Maybe you only use 2 weights for stabilizing, a 60 and an 80, and it's very specific. Only time that you will depart from your normal threads is when you're doing a special project that requires a different thread. But the only way to narrow down your choices is to test. Test out the threads. You are welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So I want to share with you another option to simplify thread choice, right? We go to the shop or we go to a quilt show and we see these beautiful threads, right? We see these beautiful threads and we think, wow, I really like these threads. They're so colorful. They're so beautiful, right? And then we don't know how to use it in our project. So what if I took out, let me see if I can do this here, take away the saturation in this camera, and then I will change it to gray. All of a sudden, all that color is gone and all we see are grays. And if you've been here before, you know that I always say to lay out the threads you think will work in a project. Take a photograph of your quilt and the thread in gray to see the thread value. Thread value. I have not personally worked with silk threads, although I have some in my stash. I have yet to test them out. Let me bring back the color. So now we have the color back. So not only do you want to consider thread in terms of the color, you want to consider thread in values. Light red, medium red, dark red. Light blue, medium blue, dark blue. Having different thread color values make a difference in how we choose our threads. So I want to share with you some gray thread. This is truly gray thread, right? If you want to simplify your choice in threads, selection for quilting, you can get a wide range of gray threads in your favorite weight and type of thread. If your favorite weight for quilting is 40 weight and you like polyester, get that one type and weight in several gray shades. Does that make sense? All right, let's take a look. So here are some grays. That's what I did a couple years ago. I said I'm going to get some different colors, or shades, I should say, shades of gray. All of these are different shades of gray. Some of them are different weights, like these are with the black bottom. These are 60 weight glide, but they are different shades. And the grays have also a hint of color in them. So one might be a cool gray, a warm gray. This is a warmer gray. This is a cooler gray. One looks more silver. Hopefully that makes sense. Why would I want different hints of gray with color and different values of gray? Hopefully, in my demonstration of when I took all the color out of the camera with that multicolor spool of thread, it represents these grays. Let me get that again so you can see. So all of these threads have a gray value that's similar to the grays that you see here. Okay? So when we're using a color, whether it's blue or pink or green, it has a value on the gray scale. So if you want to simplify your choices for a quick stitching of your quilt project, choose a color value that has been reduced to the grayscale. Okay? So, a lot of my quilts that I quilt for publications and magazines, I will use a gray thread that has the same color value as the quilt top. I will take a photo of the quilt with all the different fabrics and I will find the middle gray value. The gray value that is mostly throughout the quilt. And if it's a very light quilt, it's likely that I'm going to use something on the silver side. If it's a darker quilt, I'm going to use something that's darker. If it has a warm hint to it, I probably will use something in the middle range of the grays. This is a darker one than this one. This one has a warmer hint to it than this. Hopefully you can see that difference. All right. So, what are your thoughts about having different shades of gray in your thread stash for a quick go-to? I also recommend that if you group your threads, especially for quilting, in one area of your storage, group them in colors. All your reds, all your greens, all your purples, right? Then see the variations that you have. Do you have a light, medium, and dark? Would you be prepared to use a medium blue for your next blue quilt, right? And why would we want to have light, medium, and dark? Perhaps we want to have contrast in our quilting. Maybe we want to have blending thread in our quilting, or maybe we want the thread to have a slight contrast. That's all going to be determined by the value, the gray value of the color, right? Light, medium, and dark. So if our quilt is dark and we want it to blend, we want a dark red, a dark blue, similar to the colors we see in the quilt. If we want the thread in that same quilt to show just a little bit, that means we need a dark shade, but maybe one step lighter or 2 steps lighter, because we don't want it to completely contrast. We don't want it to completely blend. We want it to have just a little bit of a presence when we see the quilting. These are some of the choices that we want to have available to us by having a thread selection based on the gray scale or values. Now, you personally might not like high contrast, so you may not have very light threads if you make mostly medium to dark value quilts. Okay, think about your personal choices. What colors do you tend to gravitate to? Do you tend to make light and bright rainbow quilts? Or do you tend to make, there's another Civil War quilts that are like what? Earth tones? Are you an earth tone type person who likes warm colors, warm yellows and burgundies and browns, you may not like light and bright in those quilts, right? Okay. So, those are some of the choices that we need to consider when it comes to thread. And you want to create something that works consistently for you. Once in a while, yes, we will depart from that. Now, how do we begin once we've gone through our thread collection? We know what weights we like, we know what type we like. How do we now start to put that in our quilt? Put the thread into practice. Let's take a look at some practice methods. One is going back to what we all started with, decorative stitching. Many of you already commented that you would use lighter weight thread for decorative stitching. Table runner, this is a section of a table runner. The whole table runner was stitched with decorative stitching that's programmed on my machine. Yellow and gold threads, fabulous. That is what she loves, and I love that she knows gold and yellow work for her quilting. That's where we all want to go. Find what works for us. And the only way to do that is to try and test, right? So, my early days, I went back into my archives and I pulled out what I wanted to show you was from the very beginning. The very beginning is when I was using decorative stitching. And I said, I'm going to stitch out and learn about thread, weights, and how it looks with the decorative stitching. What is next? Right after that, remember last week, if you were here, not last week, the week before, the last time we were together for the Masterclass series, part 4, I talked about stippling. If you are just learning free motion quilting and you are stippling, you're learning how to get a consistent stitch length, you're learning how to move your hands, this is a perfect opportunity to try different threads. Stippling or meandering is perfect for experimenting with different thread weights, different types of thread, and thread colors. And contrast. Look at the contrast of the beautiful, I think beautiful, variegated thread on the black with stippling. That was an opportunity for me to try this variegated thread and practice my free motion quilting. So no matter where you are, what stage you are in your journey, you can combine what you're learning in free motion quilting with what you are learning with thread. Now's the time to experiment with thread, whether it's decorative stitching or free motion. Whatever technique you are learning or using, it's an opportunity to experiment with thread. The next thing is ruler quilting. What did I want to do specifically with this? Using a tote bag, another tote bag, as a way to practice with thread and a quilting technique. My focus here was the quilting technique, using one ruler to quilt the whole project, the tote bag and the zippered pouch. These small projects are fantastic for practicing those techniques and experimenting with thread. All right, did I miss something that Kimberly said? All right, awesome. Hey, Alex, welcome. So glad that you're here. Test, test, test. Technology, when it comes to making thread, has changed over the years, and you want to know where we are with thread. Okay. And I was looking at a catalog I have from Metler Thread, and they have so many different thread types for different purposes with different things that it can do. We are in an age where we have a lot of options. It's not just cotton. Cotton is fantastic, but move outside of cotton because there are so many other things that we can do and make and get different results with different types of threads. Cotton isn't the only game in town, right? All right, so how else can we practice? By selecting different things to help us with multiple techniques. And one is a pre-printed panel. I love pre-printed panels to practice multiple techniques. One, to practice free motion quilting. Two, to practice free motion quilting where I have to follow a line. That is a skill and a technique that is only developed over time. If you want to use stencils, that's something you have to practice over and over again. And a pre-printed panel printed with ink that washes out is a perfect way to do that. And this is my opportunity to test a new thread. Yes, there is a lot to learn. That is so true. When I have this opportunity, I take a panel. This one is 16 inches by 16 inches. I like small projects to test out the threads, to test out the skills that I want to improve on, right? Once it's stitched, I followed the line as much as I could. All you have to do is wash out the ink. I went to my bathroom sink, filled it up, and all the ink came out, and all that's left is my stitching. So even if I didn't follow the line absolutely, which I didn't, because remember, I'm learning, I'm practicing, I wash it out. Then what do I do with it? After it's done, I decide that I'm going to put it and pair it with another test. Part of this masterclass series is helping us think about ways we can improve our skills so that when we make that important quilt, that's an anniversary gift or a wedding gift, we have the skills to do it, right? So I decided that I wanted to learn how to stitch this block with the Go Cutter. I made a test block. I cut it, accurate cutting with dies, right? I already prepped my fabric. I cut it with accurate cutting because I use a die cutter. I pieced it. Then I put on a border on the block to make it the same size as the panel, right? Let me go back. Same size as this pre-printed panel. Once I did that, I added a zipper and I made it into a pillow. So both sides of the pillow were an opportunity to test and try and improve different techniques. Cutting, piecing, free motion quilting, thread. Every time we make something, we have an opportunity to practice or learn or improve a technique. How to install a zipper. I don't know how about you. I don't know about you, but I've had in my early days difficulty learning how to attach a zipper, and a pillow is a perfect way to practice a zipper, right? And then it's finally done, finished, and I was glad that I tried this. What does practice do? When we test, we find out what we like and what we don't like. We learn what threads work for us. We learn what techniques we want to do, whether it's free motion or ruler quilting or walking foot or decorative stitching. We find out which ones we like and enjoy, which ones give us the results that we want. And the things that we don't enjoy or like, we put them aside, and maybe we don't want to learn that technique right now. We save it for another time. But it also builds our confidence, and that's important. It's important to think about, at least in my eyes, you can think differently, of course, is that when I practice on these small pieces, table runners, tote bags, pillows. I try different cutting techniques, try different piecing techniques, different thread. It builds my confidence because I know I'm not guessing. When I move to those important projects, I know that this weight and this type of thread works well with free motion quilting on my machine. I know that when I do X, Y, and Z, I use this type of cutting device, I get this result. I'm confident. I'm not nervous in front of the machine. I'm not nervous at the cutting table, afraid to cut my fabric because I might cut it incorrectly, because I've practiced ahead of time. All right. Many of you probably know this already, but I just want to share it for those who are new. Remember, we are a community of ladies at different levels, right? So, and it also is always good to review, right? To go over things, to think, maybe I should consider trying this technique that I dismissed a few years ago. Maybe I could try it again. And I've done that. I've tried things like curve piecing, which I still haven't mastered. I have a different specialty curve foot. I have special techniques, glue basting. I have special cutters to get the cutting for a curve accurate. I still can't piece curves very well. It's still something that is elusive to me. And so I will put it on a shelf, go back to what I enjoy, and then come back to it every couple of years and try again. All right, so this is the last one. This is the last. We're almost at a time. I know we're almost at the end of our hour, but look at this. Are you wondering? Someone said, I think two of you said that you're wondering, okay, I've chosen the thread, but it's the quilting design. How do I move from practice to quilt? Practice is, in my estimation, so important. And we can practice in different ways. And I just showed you several, right? Another way that I practice specifically quilting designs is to take a fat quarter and I just play. It's my sandbox. I will play. And sometimes the play is unstructured and other times it's structured. In this instance, I had a very specific goal. I said, I'm going to take 4 different acrylic templates or rulers and stitch out a design. I'm going to have fun doing it. I'm going to play. There's no right and wrong, but I want to learn how to combine different rulers to get a design. Okay, just have fun. I started in the middle and I worked my way out, adding different elements that I thought might work. There was no plan. I just said, let me start in the center and just add elements as I go with those rulers. So that's what I did here. These are the templates that I use: a circle template, a curve template, a straight edge template, and then a specialty template to get the designs you see in the center. I had fun. And then after it was all done, you saw I added some free motion pebbles and other designs in the background. All right. Okay, Dina, you had fun. What's next? How do you get this fun playtime? Because this was an opportunity not only to have fun, but also to learn the technique, to gain confidence with the technique, to think about my thread choices with the technique and the particular design. All of that played a part. How do I move this from playtime? Yes, this was all done on a home sewing machine, not a long arm. This was done years ago on a home sewing machine. If you know how to free motion quilt or have tried ruler quilting, you can do this. It's something that does take time, but if you do it little by little, I didn't start here. I started off with straight edge quilting, like the tote bag. If you were here earlier, I quilted that with straight lines. That was the beginning stages of me learning how to use acrylic rulers, was to use it to stitch straight lines. So now I'm introduced to these other templates. I want to get better at using these templates, and so I did this. Now, how do I move it to a quilt? Any part of our quilting can be sectioned. We can take a piece of what you see here. I'm going to remove that. Any part of what's been quilted here can be moved to an actual quilt. I don't have to take the complete design in the center. I can take parts of the design. And so that's what I did. And if you remember, I said that we always should think about stitching what we know. I know straight lines, right? You know straight lines with a walking foot. Add the straight lines. Then add a little bit of what you are learning, whether it's a free motion quilting pattern you're learning, or in my case, in this particular case, I wanted to add ruler quilting. So I took one of those templates from the design and added what I stitched in that with that template, which is in the center. I took portions of that template design and added it to this star quilt, section by section. And this, if some of you remember, I talked about different ways we can place. Part of the 10 steps is how do we place a design in a project. One of the easiest ways to place something in a project is called patchwork quilting, meaning you stitch in the patchwork. So I didn't stitch over the entire quilt. I stitched with an edge to edge. I stitched in the individual patchwork pieces, straight lines, and part of the ruler quilting designs with that template circular design in sections, right? Okay, well, I hope that has been helpful for you ladies to think about thread and then how to move from analyzing what you have in your thread cabinet, its value, and then moving on to practicing those techniques, practicing the thread choices in actual quilts. So if you are just starting to stabilize your quilt and you haven't tried 60-way thread, maybe you want to try 60-way thread. Maybe you are in the middle of learning a certain type of machine quilting, walking foot, ruler quilting, free motion. Now you want to start experimenting with thread weights. You are welcome. You are welcome. Now remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? This is a recap of the 10 steps to stress-free machine quilting, but on a very surface level. All the information, really, most of it is in the course. Some of the ladies are already in the course. They are already going through the material. Some have gone through it multiple times. It's an opportunity to not only be in the course to learn the steps in an in-depth way, but also to be held accountable, because you can hand in assignments. You can say, Dina, Geraldine, can you look at what I did with my fabric prep or my cutting or my piecing? I'm trying this tool or this technique. What about my stitch in the ditch? I'm trying this weight. You can send me questions. You can send me photos. You can go through this over and over and over again. It's yours for life. As long as I have the website up and I'm in business, which I don't plan to stop anytime soon, it is yours. And you have 24-hour access. You can look at it on your cell phone because it includes an app. You can watch it in the doctor's office. You can watch it on the car on a long road trip. It's yours. One step at a time. And when you are working on a project and you forgot something, you just go back and rewatch that video, right? For all 10 steps. And of course, it's December and I am giving everyone a gift. It's called a December gift. DEC gift is the coupon code to get 30% off the course. 30% off of the whole month of December. That is for you. You are welcome. I'm so glad that you like all the information. You can't wait to watch the other videos. Awesome. If you're just joining us, you missed the masterclass series. This was the last one of the masterclass series. We've gone through all 10 steps, but I do want to share something the next time we meet. Watch those. If you think the course is for you, by the end of the month, you will have an opportunity to take advantage of the 30% off the course. Okay? It will end on January 1st. Right? And if you liked, guess what? Did you like the Lydia tote? That process of piecing, cutting, piecing, all of that, step-by-step instructions on how to tote, how to quilt with a straight edge. If you only just started ruler quilting, this is an opportunity to not just make a tote bag, but to practice those 10 steps from the beginning all the way to the quilting process, right? All 10 steps, you can practice this in the course. And of course, for the month of December, 50% off. If you put this code in, Lydia50, that course is 50% off. Make the tote bag, learn about thread and choose a thread that you love, learn about ruler quilting, piecing, step-by-step color instructions and diagrams for this course. Okay? You are welcome. You are welcome. My pleasure. So now, the last thing I want to say to you is thank you for coming, and don't keep Quilt Conversations Live a secret. Quilt Conversations Live, as you know, is sponsored by Clover. The first show of the month is sponsored by Clover, so I thank Clover because we love Clover products. They help us with our sewing, crafting, and quilting projects. Tell your friends, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed this masterclass series. Ladies, thanks for joining me. I had a wonderful time. You are quite welcome. I'm so glad we had this chance to talk about thread and practice methods. I want to help you go to the next step wherever you are in your journey, and I hope this series has helped you in that way. Thank you for coming. I'll see you next time. Yes, thank you, Lori. Thank you, Kimberly. So glad that you were here. And Alex. Oh, Zena, you're new to long arm quilting. You are welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My pleasure. I know we've gone over. Thank you for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time for another Quilt Conversations Live.